Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're chasing someone who's always one step ahead emotionally? Like you're pouring your heart out, but they're holding back. They tell you everything's fine, but something in your gut screams otherwise. That's because it isn't fine. And here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. Avoidants have a playbook, and while you're stuck guessing the rules, they're whispering the real truth to their best friends behind your back. Today, I'm pulling the curtain back. I'm giving you the 5 truths avoidants tell their best friends but hide from you. And I promise, once you hear this, you won't unsee it. Here's something most people don't realize until they're knee-deep in confusion. People who avoid emotional intimacy aren't cold and they aren't heartless. They're scared, deeply scared. Not of you, but of what it means to truly need someone. When you're in a relationship with an avoidant, it can feel like they're always holding back. They might show up, flirt, say the right things, even have great chemistry, but the moment things get real, they flinch. They'll start pulling away. Maybe they stop texting as often. They cancel plans. They suddenly need space. And you're left standing there wondering, what did I do wrong? Let me tell you something. You didn't do anything wrong. What you're experiencing is someone who doesn't know how to sit with the feeling of needing another human being, because to them, needing someone feels like a trap. You see, needing others was dangerous at some point in their life. Maybe they grew up in a home where emotions weren't safe, where being vulnerable meant being rejected, ignored, or even punished. Or maybe they got burned in past relationships. They opened up, trusted, and then got blindsided. Either way, somewhere deep inside, they developed this belief, if I rely on someone, I will get hurt. And so they decided, maybe not consciously, but very effectively, I'll never let that happen again. That's where the avoidant behavior starts. They build walls, but they don't look like walls at first. They look like confidence, independence, charm, wit. They seem strong, self-reliant, even magnetic. You think, wow, they've got it all together. But what's really happening is that they've mastered the art of never needing anyone too much. They show up just enough to stay connected, but not so much that they lose control. And here's the heartbreaking part. They do care. They'll talk to their best friends and say things like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I really like them. I just can't let myself go there. They know they're blocking something real. They know they're missing out on intimacy, but needing someone feels so unsafe, so unfamiliar, that they'd rather risk losing you than feel that vulnerable. They don't tell you this, of course. To you, they'll just act distant. They'll minimize your feelings. They'll say things like you're overreacting or I'm just not ready for a relationship right now. But behind closed doors with their trusted circle, they confess, I'm scared of getting attached. I'm scared I'll lose myself. I don't know how to be close to someone without panicking. And that's the truth. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect themselves. But here's where you come in. It's not your job to fix that fear. It's not your job to shrink yourself, become less emotional, or play it cool just to make them feel comfortable. Because the more you try to prove you're safe, the more they'll back away. That's the irony. The more emotionally available you are, the more their alarm bells go off. This isn't about blaming them. This is about seeing things clearly, understanding that someone pulling away from you doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means they haven't healed. And until they face that fear of needing someone, no amount of love will break through that wall. So if you're in this situation, here's what I want you to hear loud and clear. Their fear is real, but it's not your responsibility. You deserve a connection where your emotional presence isn't seen as a threat, but as a gift. Don't twist yourself into a smaller version just to keep someone who's not ready. Because real love, it doesn't flinch when things get close. It stays. It shows up. And it embraces the need, not as a weakness, but as the beautiful, messy, courageous part of being human. One of the most confusing experiences in a relationship is when someone tells you how great you are and then slowly pulls away anyway. You hear things like, "You're incredible," or "I've never met anyone like you," and yet their actions say something else entirely. They're distant, hesitant, on edge when things start feeling emotionally real. And it doesn't make sense, because if you're everything they say you are, why are they acting like they're unsure? Here's what they're not telling you, but they are telling their best friend. "This person is amazing, but I don't know if I can handle this." Now read that again, because it has absolutely nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their fear of what it means to handle emotional closeness. For someone with avoidant tendencies, love feels threatening, not because they don't want it, but because they don't trust themselves inside of it. They've learned to equate emotional depth with instability or danger. Maybe they've been in relationships before where feelings got messy. Maybe love meant losing their identity. Maybe being close led to betrayal or disappointment. So now, when they find someone who actually shows up, who's emotionally present, expressive, real, it doesn't feel good. It feels overwhelming. To you, your love might feel like a safe space, but to them, it can feel like a wave they don't know how to swim in. Not because of who you are, but because they don't trust their own ability to stay grounded once they let someone in. So what do? They put on the brakes, they pull back, they start to look for reasons why it's too much. And because they don't want to hurt you directly, they say it to someone else. They say it to their best friend. They might say things like, "They're too emotional," or "They text me too much," or "I feel like I'm being suffocated." But the reality is, none of that is about you. It's about what emotional intimacy triggers in them. When you offer connection, they perceive pressure. When you're open and loving, they perceive risk. And instead of leaning in and exploring that discomfort, they blame the intensity of the relationship. They convince themselves that the connection is the problem, not their reaction to it. So, what do you get? Mixed signals. You're amazing, but they're confused. I like you, but they're not ready. They show up just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to let you feel secure. And you start to internalize the inconsistency. You start wondering, maybe I am too much. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe if I dialed myself down, they'd finally stay. Let me stop you right there. You are not too much. Your emotional availability, your clarity, your consistency, that's not the problem. That's what healthy looks like. The problem is they haven't done the inner work to feel safe receiving that kind of connection. So instead of saying, "This is triggering something in me I need to work on," they say, "Maybe this relationship is too intense. It's self-protection. It's fear dressed up as logic. And it's not malicious. It's unconscious." But that doesn't mean you need to stick around waiting for them to wake up to it. Because the longer you stay in that emotional limbo, the more you start editing yourself. You shrink, you second guess, you emotionally starve yourself, trying to make the relationship more comfortable for them. But love should not require you to shrink. If someone tells their best friend how amazing you are and still pulls away, believe what their distance is showing you. They are not ready to hold the kind of connection you're offering. And that's not rejection, it's redirection towards someone who won't see your love as something to handle, but as something to honor. You deserve that. There's a moment in every situationship, almost like clockwork, when you realize the connection feels off. You're showing up, opening up, leaning in, but the other person, they're present but distant, engaged but guarded. You think maybe you're imagining it, maybe they're just busy or stressed, but deep down you feel it. They don't fully let you in. And here's the wild part. Behind your back, they're admitting it. They're saying to their best friend, "I want love. I just don't trust it." That's it. That's the root of the whole thing. They want it deeply, but they've been so hurt, so let down, so disappointed. maybe even by people who claim to love them, that now when something real shows up, they freeze. They can't tell the difference between a safe relationship and a dangerous one because their nervous system treats all intimacy like a threat. It isn't about logic, it's about wiring. When someone has been burned emotionally, especially repeatedly, they start to believe love is a setup, that letting someone close will only lead to pain. So even when they meet someone trustworthy, maybe even someone perfect for them, they still hesitate because their body remembers, their brain remembers, and that fear whispers, don't fall for it, don't believe it, don't trust this. And because that fear is so ingrained, they often won't tell you any of this. They'll show up to the relationship like everything's fine, or they'll keep it surface level. They'll joke about catching feelings, make excuses about why they just don't do emotions, or they'll keep things casual so they don't have to go deeper. And if you try to ask what's really going on, you might get brushed off, redirected, or even blamed for being too intense. But with their best friend, they tell the truth. They say things like, I wish I could trust this. I wish I could just be normal about it. They know they're not fully engaging. They know they're keeping a wall up. And more often than not, they hate that about themselves because they want love. They really do. They just don't trust that it'll last, or that they won't get hurt, or worse, that once someone really sees them, flaws, fears, the messy stuff, they'll leave. So instead of risking heartbreak, they self-protect. And self-protection looks like withdrawal. It looks like shutting down emotionally the second things get real. It looks like calling you too much, or saying, I'm just not ready. But that's not the truth. The truth is, they're afraid not of you, but of what it would mean to actually believe in you. And if you're on the receiving end of that, it can feel like emotional whiplash. You feel them pulling back, and you start doubting yourself. You think, maybe I'm coming on too strong. Maybe if I just give them more time, they'll come around. So you wait. You water yourself down. You shrink your needs to keep them comfortable, all while they're telling their best friend they wish they could be different, but they're not doing anything to change it. That's the part that hurts the most. They know they're holding back. They know they're not giving you the connection you deserve, but instead of communicating that to you, they hide behind distance. They'd rather keep you confused than risk showing you the fear they don't know how to handle. But here's the thing. Your job isn't to rescue someone from their fear. Your job is to be with someone who meets you in love with the same openness and courage you bring to the table. Wanting love but not trusting it is a wound. And wounds need healing. If they're not ready to do that work, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means they're unavailable. So don't confuse emotional damage for emotional depth. And don't wait for someone to trust love if they're not willing to trust you. You deserve someone who doesn't just want love, but knows how to show up for it. One of the biggest lies avoidants make you believe is that they don't care, that they just move on easily, that they walk away from deep conversations and intense emotional moments without a second thought. But that's not true. Not even close. The truth? They replay conversations in their head constantly. They overthink everything. They just don't let you see it. This is one of the most frustrating dynamics about being connected to someone avoidant. They make you feel like you were the only one invested, like you were the only one affected. You're sitting there analyzing every detail, wondering if you said too much or asked for too much. Meanwhile, they're off living their life like it never mattered. But behind closed doors, when no one's watching, they're spiraling too. They're going over every word you said, every message they didn't respond to, every call they missed. They just don't tell you that. You might think they're detached or cold, but the truth is they're caught in their head, stuck in this loop of doubt, fear, and regret. They're not emotionless. They're emotionally suppressed. They've trained themselves to keep a lid on vulnerability because to them, expressing emotion feels like giving up control. They want to appear strong, unaffected, untouchable. but that's all it is, an appearance. They'll go to their best friend and admit it. They'll say, I think I messed that up. I didn't mean to push them away, or I felt something real, and I panicked. They'll even admit they miss you, but they won't pick up the phone. They won't say it to your face because admitting that directly would make them feel exposed, and exposure equals risk. And risk is something they've spent years trying to avoid. You might be surprised to know how many times they've typed out a message and deleted it, how many times they've hovered over your name thinking of what to say, then decided it was safer to say nothing at all. You may think they've moved on, but in their private moments, they're still tied to you emotionally, not in a healthy, open, vulnerable way, but in a mentally exhausting, shame-ridden way that keeps them stuck. They don't show their pain because they've learned to intellectualize it. They don't cry it out. They think it to death. And this is what makes it so confusing for you, because you're left with silence, and silence feels like rejection. You assume they didn't care, but the truth is they cared more than they could admit, more than they were prepared to handle. And instead of leaning into that discomfort and growing through it, they did what they always do. They shut down, they went inside themselves, played the scenes over and over, but said nothing. And the hardest part? You never get to know any of this. You never hear the replay. You just get distance, ambiguity, ghosting, maybe even a few breadcrumbs if they're feeling brave. But the real emotional truth, that stays hidden with their closest friend or locked inside their head. But don't mistake that silence for peace. They're not at peace. They're anxious. They're anxious. They're conflicted. They're torn between wanting connection and not knowing how to feel safe in it. You just don't see the turmoil. You're on the outside of a war that's happening in private. And unfortunately, loving someone who refuses to share their inner world with you becomes lonely. Even if the connection felt deep, you deserve someone who doesn't just replay conversations in their head, but actually shows up and finishes them. Someone who talks to you instead of about you. Someone who doesn't just think about what went wrong, but chooses to repair, rebuild, and stay present. Because the truth is, thinking about you isn't the same as being there for you, and overthinking isn't connection. Action is. There's a pattern that shows up over and over in people with avoidant tendencies, and it's this. They will talk about healing, but rarely do the work. They'll admit they have issues with vulnerability. They'll say they're emotionally unavailable. They'll even joke about their trust issues or tell their best friend, yeah, I probably need therapy. And that admission might make them sound self-aware, but let's be honest, it's not the same as doing something about it. See, awareness without action is just avoidance dressed up in self-help language. Avoidants are masters of using insight to stay stuck. They know what the problem is. They'll say, I've always had walls, or I don't open up easily, or I push people away when they get too close. And that sounds vulnerable, but in most cases, it's actually a smokescreen. Because the moment you press further, the moment you say, okay, then what are you doing about it? That's when they retreat. They talk about doing the work, but they rarely follow through. They might read a few self-help books, watch a few TikToks, listen to a podcast and say, wow, that really hit me. But then they go right back to the same patterns. They don't reach out. They don't apologize. They don't change how they show up in real time when it counts. They intellectualize their wounds instead of healing them. Why? Because doing the real work, therapy, accountability, facing uncomfortable truths, sitting with emotional discomfort without running is terrifying. It threatens the protective system they've built their entire identity around. If they pull that down, what's left? Who are they if they're not always the one in control, the one who doesn't need anyone, the one who always walks away first? The truth is, healing means letting go of the stories that keep you safe but stuck. And for an avoidant, that story often sounds like, I'm better off alone, or if I don't get too close, I won't get hurt. So even when they feel the desire for connection, even when they meet someone who makes them want to try, they still default to the comfort of their defenses. They'll tell their best friend, I know I messed up. I should probably deal with my stuff. And then they won't, not because they don't want to, but because doing the work would mean risking the one thing they value most, emotional safety. And to them, safety has always meant distance. Meanwhile, you're left holding all the pieces. You're the one who believed in the potential. You saw glimpses of the real them, the tenderness, the depth, the spark, and you thought, if they could just open up a little more, this could be something amazing. But the reality is, potential isn't love, and awareness isn't change. You can't build a healthy relationship with someone who refuses to grow. You can't stay hoping that one day they'll wake up and finally choose healing over hiding. Because even if they know they need help, if they're not actively doing the work, you'll always be loving a version of them that doesn't really exist. And that's what hurts the most. They could become someone who's emotionally present, who communicates, who doesn't run, but unless they choose to put in the effort to change those patterns, they'll keep circling the same drain and you'll keep getting disappointed. So here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. It doesn't matter how self-aware someone is if they refuse to take action. Love requires more than insight. It requires courage, consistency, effort. And if they're not ready to offer that, not just in theory, but in practice, you have every right to walk away. Because loving someone who's not doing the work will break your heart over and over again until you finally realize that your peace is more important than their potential.